Hi all, I'm going to quickly show you a few things for building and running C++ programs on your Mac. So first thing, I'm assuming you've downloaded the source examples from something like the Udemy course. And so that's going to put the examples somewhere on your machine. So once it's downloaded to your machine, you should be able to run them from terminal. So I did a command spacebar to open up the Spotlight field. You can also click on this hourglass here to bring up Spotlight. So that brings up your terminal. So if you go to the directory, which has all your examples, so mine is in projects 312. You can also get there from Finder. So I'm just like you can navigate through files using Finder, you can also navigate using Terminal. So here in Finder, I have my examples here, C++ beginners. And I'm going to go in Finder to the same folder. And let's do an easy one. Let's do hello world. So I did CD. I started typing hello, and then I did tab, which completed it for me. The additional slashes are there because there are spaces in the name. So that brings us here. And then I can just run clang plus hello world CPP like that. So that builds our example. And then it creates a file a.out, which I can run like this. A.out is our executable. And so here we're just typing hello world. And so running the program produces the output hello world. So with this, you can run all the examples. Here, let's run another example. Let's go into if. I go into this. So a few things, if you're not used to navigating directories with terminal, CD stands for change directory. And this allows us to go into a directory. So this directory here has these files in it. It looks like it's already been compiled, so it has some of these other files also in the directory. ls lists everything that's in the directory. That's what I'm doing here. If I want to go up one directory, I do cd ... just like this. So that brings me up. Do it again. That brings me up. And now I'm at the root of our C++ examples, which has everything in it. So if I went into CD, if, I can also go do tab, and that shows me a preview of everything that's in the directory. It shows me a preview of all the things that I can traverse into. So there are several if examples. I'm going to go into if, and I can also go down multiple directories by giving a path. So I have if/source, just like this. So let's do clang plus if dot, here I want to do if cpp. So that builds this example. I do a.out. And here, this program is asking for some input, some text input. So I'm going to give it some. And I'm like, okay, so that doesn't work. Turns out this program wants something like this. It says password accepted. So just by downloading the examples and installing the compiler using Xcode, you have everything you need to review C++. However, I'm also going to show you in this video how to use code. So again, I'm going to do command spacebar, and I'm going to type code and enter. So that launches VS Code. And so with this, what we can do is we can open our directory, which has all our source files in it, projects, 3D Home, C++, open. All right, so that brings us something that looks like this. Here, we have all our examples listed. We can expand them out, look at the files. This is our kind of main options panel. This toggles the directory view, the Explorer. This allows us to search our project for whatever we want, search and replace. This is a Git extension tab. We will use Git from the command line, but you're welcome to try using it from here too if you end up liking that better. This is visual debug panel, and this is the extension panel. So I'm going to suggest that you install these C++ extensions. They're going to give us some nice IntelliSense, which shows you hints as you're typing, debugging, and code browsing abilities, which basically is going to make coding in a larger code base much easier for us. I also recommend installing key bindings for your editor of choice. So I use Vim. You can, there's support for many different editors in this tool. So you can use Atom. Atom's a very popular one and a good one to start with if you don't know a code editor already. Another good one is Sublime. And another one, also very popular, Emacs. So if you plan to be coding in the long term, I highly recommend learning an editor. It's going to help you code more quickly. So let's go back here and let's try building our example from here. So let's go to Hello World, click on this, double click, brings it up and locks it on a tab. So now what I can do is I'm going to show you this first. So we can also have an integrated terminal here. So if I do terminal, new terminal, that brings up basically the same terminal that we used before. So I can do the same thing I did before from inside here. So I can do hello tab to get into hello world. I can cd into source ls, and I can run just like I did before, clang hello world cpp, just like this. And that produces our executable, and we can run it. So the other thing we can do is we can also run and debug through code. So let me do start debugging. So this is going to, here it is running the clang task, and now it's putting us into a debug mode where we can step line by line. So here is our debug panel. The first button here is continue. Let's see. Actually, before I tell you about this, I'm going to stop debugging. So this is stop. Before I do that, I want to show you this. So like if you click in this margin here, you can put what's called a breakpoint. And so what a breakpoint allows us to do is set places in our code where we'd like to inspect variables, call stack, or start stepping line by line. So wherever the debugger encounters a breakpoint, the program's going to pause execution. So I put one here on the first line, and now I'm going to do run, start debugging. Great. So now we're back to where we were. This continue, what continue does is it tells the debugger to continue running until it encounters another breakpoint. This step over, this steps forward one line. So just like this. This steps into, if there's a function on this line, the debugger will step into that function and allow us to step through line by line inside that function. Step out, what step out does is it finishes the execution of the current function, and then it brings us back to the calling function and allows us to step by step, line by line in the calling function. This restarts the program, this stops the program. So this is a really simple program. If I run continue, it's just going to go through the last line and stop. The output is shown here in the debugger console with its white space characters showing. So let's do something a little more interesting. So first off, let's see what happens. We haven't shown what happens when there's an error. So let's write some code that has an error in it. So first thing we see is we get some helpful hints showing us that something is wrong. Let's keep that there. I'm going to run start debugging. So when I click this, it's going to compile. It's going to show us that there's some errors. So let's just show errors. So here we see a listing of the errors. We can also look at the terminal to get this view on the errors. So whichever you prefer. Sometimes I find this error more helpful. But it's showing us line 10 that we're missing a semicolon. So let's do that. So one thing I'm going to note too is this terminal. So there are a few different sub tabs here. This terminal, so this is the output from code when it tried to compile our program. There's actually multiple shells here, or multiple terminals. So if I go back here, I return to the original terminal that we were using to compile. So let's go back to our task terminal. And so now I've fixed this. So now let's try start debugging again. All right, so now we're here, and now we've got some local variables. So we can see something in this local variable pane. I also should point out this is the call stack. So this shows us what function we're currently in and who's called that function. And we can see here, main is the first function of our program. So it's always called first. And these are system files, which are calling into our function. So let's see. So let's step. So we see that we have our local variable q showing up here, but it hasn't been initialized yet. So it just has garbage value in it. Let's step forward. So after we initialize it, we see it has the value here. And a few other things that's cool is you can actually change the value using this pane. And similarly, you can also type commands in the debug console here. So in this way, as you're, for example, if you're checking some code and you see that there's a mistake and you don't want to restart, you can actually fix it. Or you can, while you're debugging, see how your program executes with different values without recompiling. So let's continue here. So last thing I want to say about using the visual debugger here is when you run it for the first time, code is going to try to automatically detect your compiler, which in our case is going to be Clang, and our debugger, which in our case here is going to be something called LLDB. So it's going to try to auto detect. It may not auto detect it correctly. So to check that, look at this directory, .vscode, which is something that code's going to create automatically when you select run start debugging. And so what that's going to do is create these two files, launch and tasks. And if your code is not working, and by that code, I mean the tool code, check that your task.json has these values, and then check that your launch.json has these values. And that's everything I think I wanted to show you today.